I stood alone in my kitchen on Thanksgiving morning, staring at the untouched turkey I had prepared for 17 people who never showed up. In that moment, I realized that 10 years of pleading for even a shred of love from my own children had finally shattered something inside me that could never be fixed. 3 months later, I walked away from it all: the house, the money, the family name. And I never looked back. What they didn't know was that I wasn't just a grieving widow they could forget. I was the one who held all the cards. My name is Florence. I'm 72 years old now, and I'm here to tell you a story about what happens when you mistake someone's kindness for weakness and their silence for acceptance. Before we get into this, I'd love to know, where are you watching from? Drop your city or state in the comments. I always wonder who's listening to these stories of mine. Now, let me take you back to where it all began. 38 years ago, I married the love of my life, Richard. We built everything together: a beautiful home in a quiet neighborhood in Connecticut, 3 children who we raised with every ounce of love we had, and a life that felt like it was pulled straight from the pages of a storybook. Richard worked in commercial real estate development, and I was a school librarian for 30 years. We weren't extraordinarily wealthy, but we were comfortable, stable, and happy. Richard was my best friend. Every morning, he'd kiss my forehead before I even opened my eyes. Every evening, we'd sit on our back porch with sweet tea in the summer or hot cocoa in the winter, talking about everything and nothing. When our kids were young, our house was the gathering place. Birthday parties, holiday dinners, Sunday barbecues. Our home was always filled with laughter and love. Our 3 children, Lauren, Michael, and Jennifer, they were our whole world. Lauren was our firstborn, strong-willed and ambitious. Michael was our middle child, quieter but thoughtful. Jennifer was our baby, always the one who needed us most, or so I thought. We paid for their college educations without them taking on a penny of debt. We helped with down payments on their first homes. We babysat our grandchildren every week. We celebrated every milestone with them: graduations, promotions, first steps, first words. We were a close family, or at least I thought we were. Richard and I had this tradition. Every Sunday, we'd have dinner with at least one of the kids' families. It rotated, but someone was always there. Our dining room table had been custom made to seat 12 because we wanted everyone to fit comfortably. Richard would joke that our house had a revolving door because someone was always coming or going. I loved it. I loved the chaos, the noise, the feeling of being needed and wanted. Then came March 14th, 12 years ago, the day that changed everything. Richard had been feeling off for a few weeks, tired, some chest discomfort he kept brushing off as indigestion. I begged him to see a doctor, but you know how stubborn men can be. He kept saying he was fine, that he'd go next week, next month, until one morning he collapsed in our bedroom while getting dressed for work. The paramedics worked on him for 40 minutes. I watched them do chest compressions, shock his heart, try everything. But my Richard was gone. Massive heart attack. He was 68 years old. The funeral was beautiful in a terrible sort of way. All 3 of our children were there with their families. The church was packed with over 300 people. Everyone said such lovely things about Richard. What a good man he was. What a devoted husband and father. How he'd helped this person with business advice, or that person with a loan they never had to repay. I stood there in my black dress, numb, trying to hold myself together for the sake of our children and grandchildren. My grandson Tommy, who was 6 at the time, held my hand during the service. He whispered, "Grandma, is Grandpa really not coming back?" I couldn't answer him. I just squeezed his hand tighter and tried not to fall apart. At the reception afterward, our house was full of people. Everyone brought food, shared memories, offered condolences. I moved through it all like I was underwater, hearing voices, but not really processing words. My children handled the logistics. Michael greeted people at the door. Lauren organized the food. Jennifer made sure everyone had what they needed. I was grateful they were taking care of things because I felt like I was barely functioning. That night, after everyone left and it was just me and the kids, we sat in the living room where Richard and I had spent thousands of evenings together. Lauren made tea. Michael built a fire even though it wasn't that cold. I think he just needed something to do with his hands. Jennifer sat next to me on the couch. her head on my shoulder, like when she was little. "We're going to get through this together, Mom," Lauren said. "We're family. We'll take care of each other." I believed her. God help me. I believed every word. In those first few weeks after Richard died, our kids were attentive. They called every day, sometimes twice a day. They stopped by with groceries and casseroles. They helped me sort through Richard's things, his clothes, his tools in the garage, his office filled with 30 years of papers and memories. Lauren even stayed at the house for a week to keep me company. Michael mowed the lawn every Saturday like Richard used to. Jennifer called me every morning just to make sure I'd gotten out of bed. I thought, this is what family does. We support each other through the darkness. We'll get through this together. But then something shifted. It started small. The daily phone calls became every few days, then weekly, then sporadic. The visits became shorter, less frequent. I understood they had their own lives, their own families, their own responsibilities. I didn't want to be a burden. I tried to give them space to live their lives while quietly drowning in my grief alone in that big, empty house. That first Thanksgiving without Richard, I assumed I'd spend it with one of the kids like we always had. We'd rotated holidays between their homes for years, but we'd always been together, always. Lauren called me 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. "Mom, we're doing something small this year, just Brad's family. You understand, right? It's been such a difficult time for everyone." I felt a small pang in my chest, but I swallowed it down. "Of course, sweetheart, I understand. I called Michael. He was having Thanksgiving with his wife's family upstate. Sorry, Mom. Maybe Christmas." Jennifer was going to her in-laws in Boston, so I spent that first Thanksgiving without Richard, completely alone. I made myself a small dinner, set one place at the table, and tried not to look at the empty chair across from me, where Richard should have been sitting. I told myself it was just one holiday. Things would get back to normal. Christmas came. This time, I reached out earlier. I offered to host like I always had, to cook the prime rib Richard and I used to make together, to set up the tree and make the house festive like old times. But Lauren said they were doing Christmas morning, just with Brad's parents. Michael was taking his family to Disney World. Jennifer said she'd tried to stop by for a quick visit on Christmas Eve, but she never showed. I sat in my living room on Christmas morning, surrounded by wrapped presents for my children and grandchildren that no one came to collect. The lights on the tree blinked in the silence. That's when I started to realize this wasn't temporary. Year 2, I tried again. I called well in advance, offered to travel to them instead, suggested we could do a small dinner at a restaurant if hosting was too much. There was always a reason, always an excuse. They were busy. Plans changed. Maybe next time. I remember Michael's birthday that year. I drove 2 hours to his house with a homemade chocolate cake, his favorite that I'd been making since he was 5 years old. I'd called ahead to make sure he'd be home. When I arrived, the house was full of cars. Through the window, I could see balloons, people laughing, my grandchildren running around. I knocked on the door with my cake, excited to surprise him. Michael answered, and his face fell. "Mom, what are you doing here?" "It's your birthday, sweetheart. I brought your cake." He glanced back into the house nervously. "Mom, this is really just a small thing with Sarah's family. It's not a good time." I stood there on his doorstep holding that cake I'd spent all morning baking, and he didn't even invite me in. I left the cake on his porch and drove home crying so hard I had to pull over twice. By year 3, I stopped being invited to my grandchildren's birthday parties. I'd find out about them later through photos posted on Facebook. There I'd see my entire family, my children, their spouses, my 8 grandchildren, even Richard's sister and her family, all together, celebrating, smiling without me. I tried talking to Lauren about it once. I drove to her house unannounced. I was that desperate. She answered the door in her workout clothes, clearly about to leave for the gym. "Mom, what's wrong? Did something happen? I just wanted to talk. Can I come in for a minute?" She hesitated, checked her watch. "I have a class in 30 minutes. Can it wait, or can we talk on the phone later? Lauren, I never see you anymore. I never see any of you. I don't understand what happened. Did I do something wrong?" She got defensive immediately. "Mom, you're being dramatic. We're all just so busy. You know how it is with kids and work and everything. We'll make time soon, I promise. You said that 6 months ago and 6 months before that. Well, maybe if you weren't so negative all the time, we'd want to visit more. You're always making us feel guilty. That cut deep. I wasn't trying to make anyone feel guilty. I was just trying to exist in my children's lives, but I apologized anyway. I actually apologized for wanting to see my own daughter. But soon never came. I kept trying, though. God help me, I kept trying. Every holiday, every birthday, every special occasion, I'd cook, I'd call, I'd wait. I'd prepare full holiday meals just in case someone decided to surprise me with a visit. I'd sit by the phone on Sunday afternoons thinking maybe this would be the week one of them called just to chat. Year 4. I broke my wrist slipping on ice in my driveway. I called Lauren from the emergency room. She said she'd try to come by later to check on me. She never did. I managed alone. Grocery shopping one-handed, struggling to button my own shirts, sleeping sitting up because I couldn't get comfortable. Not one of my children came to help their 70-year-old mother with a broken wrist. Year 5, my granddaughter Emma got accepted to Yale, my alma mater. I found out on Facebook. I sent her a card with a check for $500 and a heartfelt letter about my own time at Yale, offering to share stories and advice. She sent a text. Thanks, Grandma. I never heard another word about it. I didn't even know she'd started college until I saw moving day photos online. Year 6, I found a lump in my breast. I was terrified. I had to go through the mammogram, the biopsy, the agonizing wait for results, completely alone. It turned out to be benign, thank God. But I'll never forget sitting in that doctor's office, waiting to find out if I had cancer, with no one to hold my hand, no one to call afterward. My children didn't even know it happened. Do you know what it feels like to set a table for your family and eat alone? To buy Christmas presents that stay wrapped in your closet because there's no one to give them to hear about your own granddaughter's high school graduation through a neighbor who saw it announced in the local paper. I started having conversations with Richard's photograph. I'd tell him about my day, ask him what I should do, apologize for not being able to keep our family together. Sometimes I'd sit in his closet where a few of his shirts still hung, breathing in the fading scent of his cologne, pretending he was still there. I was dying inside that house slowly, quietly, and no one noticed or cared. Year 4, year 5, year 6. The pattern didn't change. If anything, it got worse. The phone calls became obligatory check-ins on my birthday and Mother's Day. Quick, awkward conversations where I could hear the relief in their voices when they could finally hang up. The visit stopped entirely. I tried to understand. I really did. Maybe my grief was too much for them. Maybe I reminded them too painfully of their father. Maybe they needed to distance themselves to heal. I made every excuse for them in my mind. Convinced myself that I needed to be patient, that family is family, and they'd come around eventually. But 10 years of holidays alone, 10 years of phone calls that went unreturned, 10 years of being forgotten, dismissed, erased from the family I had given everything to build. I became invisible. Here's what broke me, what finally completely shattered whatever hope I'd been clinging to. Year 10, Thanksgiving. I knew better by then. I really did. But something in me just couldn't let go. I thought, it's been a decade since Richard died. Maybe enough time has passed. Maybe they're ready to be a family again. So I did something I swore I'd never do. I called each of my children and begged, not asked, begged. I told them how lonely I was, how much I missed them, how much it would mean to me to have just one holiday, just one, where I wasn't alone. I told them I'd cook everything, that they didn't have to bring anything or do anything except show up. I told them I needed them. Lauren said she'd think about it. Michael said he'd try. Jennifer said it sounded nice and she'd let me know. I took that as a yes. I spent 3 days preparing that Thanksgiving dinner. Turkey, stuffing, mashed potatoes, green bean casserole, cranberry sauce, 3 kinds of pie, all their favorites. I set the table for 17 people. I bought a new tablecloth, fresh flowers, nice napkins. I wanted everything to be perfect, to remind them of how it used to be, to show them what they'd been missing. I waited. The turkey came out of the oven at 2 sao, golden and perfect. 2:30 came, 3 bong, 4 ounce. I called Lauren straight to voicemail. I called Michael. No answer. Jennifer wasn't picking up either. 5. The food was getting cold. I reheated everything. 6, 7 ha. By 80 that night, I was sitting at that table alone, staring at 17 empty chairs and enough food to feed my entire family that never came. Not one of them came. Not one of them even called to say they weren't coming. I sat there until midnight, and something inside me died. Not the quick death like Richard's heart attack. This was slower, colder. It was the death of hope, the death of denial, the death of the woman who believed her children loved her. That night, I made a decision. I was done begging. I was done waiting. I was done being erased. If they wanted to act like I didn't exist, then I'd make it real. You see, there was something my children didn't know. Something Richard and I had never told them because we didn't want them to view us differently or treat us like a bank account. Richard's commercial real estate business had been far more successful than anyone realized. We lived modestly. We didn't believe in flashy displays of wealth. We wanted our children to learn the value of hard work to build their own lives, to not depend on us financially. But we had money, significant money, investments, properties, accounts they knew nothing about. The house they grew up in, it was paid off decades ago and had tripled in value. Richard's life insurance policy, substantial. His retirement accounts and investments, even more substantial. And here's the thing, I had been managing all of it since Richard died. I'd been making sure the properties stayed profitable, the investments grew, the money was handled wisely. I'd also been quietly helping my children more than they realized. Michael's daughter's private school tuition that he couldn't quite afford. I'd been paying half of it through an anonymous scholarship. Jennifer's husband's business that needed capital to expand. I'd been one of his silent investors. Lauren's mortgage payment when she lost her job 2 years ago. I'd covered 3 months of it through a check she thought came from her father's old company. They had no idea, and they never asked where I got the money to help them. They just took it and moved on with their lives, still not having time for a phone call or a visit. The Monday after that devastating Thanksgiving, I walked into my lawyer's office. Gerald had been Richard's attorney and friend for 30 years. Gerald, I need to make some changes, I said calmly. Big changes. Over the next 3 months, I systematically dismantled the life I'd built in Connecticut. I sold the family home, the house where I'd raised my children, where Richard and I had spent 38 years together. I sold it for $2.3 million to a lovely young couple expecting their first child. I hoped they'd fill it with more love than it had held in the last decade. I liquidated investments, closed joint accounts, transferred everything into my name alone. I paid off the money I'd secretly loaned to my children's ventures and closed those arrangements. I stopped the tuition payments, stopped the financial support I'd been providing without their knowledge. I cut every single financial thread that tied me to them. Then I called each of them one final time. Lauren, it's Mom. I'm calling to let you know I'm selling the house and moving. I don't know where yet, but I need a fresh start. If there's anything you want from the house, your old room, family photos, any keepsakes, you have 2 weeks to come get them. Otherwise, they'll go to charity or the new owners. Goodbye, sweetheart. The same message to Michael and Jennifer. Brief, polite, final. You know what? Not one of them came to get anything. Not one of them asked where I was going or if I was okay or if I needed help with the move. Lauren sent a text. Okay, Mom. Good luck with everything. Michael didn't respond at all. Jennifer sent a crying emoji and miss you. That told me everything I needed to know. I packed up that house myself. 38 years of memories sorted into boxes. I donated most of it. Furniture, dishes, linens, all the things that had filled our home. I kept only what fit in my car. Some clothes, a few photo albums, Richard's wedding ring, and one quilt my mother had made. Everything else. The china we'd used for every holiday, the furniture we'd picked out together, the kids' old toys I'd saved in the attic, I let go. The hardest part was Richard's woodworking shop in the garage. He'd built cribs for all the grandchildren in there, picture frames, a beautiful hope chest for Jennifer's wedding. I stood in that shop for an hour, running my hands over his tools, smelling the sawdust, crying until I had nothing left. Then I donated it all to a vocational school. At least someone would use those tools to create something. By March, almost exactly 11 years after Richard died, I was gone. I took my money, bought a small but beautiful condo in Charleston, South Carolina, where no one knew me and I could start fresh. I picked Charleston because Richard and I had honeymooned there. I wanted to be somewhere that held good memories, where I could build new ones without the weight of all that rejection. I changed my phone number. I didn't leave a forwarding address. I opened new bank accounts, set up a new life, and I disappeared. The first morning I woke up in Charleston, I sat on my balcony with coffee and watched the sun rise over the harbor. I didn't check my phone hoping for a call. I didn't plan my day around being available in case someone needed me. I didn't feel that constant ache of waiting for people who weren't coming. For the first time in 11 years, I felt free. I wasn't waiting for phone calls that wouldn't come. I wasn't cooking for people who wouldn't show up. I wasn't torturing myself with hope that my children would suddenly remember I existed. I made new friends, joined a book club, and started volunteering at a local animal shelter. I even took an art class and discovered a real passion for painting. I traveled too. I went to Italy, Ireland, and all the places Richard and I had always dreamed of visiting, but never did. I finally lived life on my own terms, free from the constant weight of rejection that had held me down for so long.